Thank you, Dan and Carrie. I am grateful to Twin Lakes Church. I'm grateful that they're having this conference, but I'm really grateful to Twin Lakes because my son and daughter-in-law are about to have their first child, which will be my wife Kathy and I's first grandchild, any day now, and they met at Camp Hammer, which, if you don't know, is a ministry of Twin Lakes Church. So I'm really grateful to Twin Lakes Church today. But I'm grateful that they care about this topic. I'm grateful that they're committed to being part of God's work in providing hope and care for people who are struggling. In the Gospels, we're told that one day Jesus, as he was teaching in the region of Galilee, where he'd grown up, where most of his ministry took place, it said he looked out over the crowd that had gathered to hear him teach, and people were there hoping to be healed. And it says that he had great compassion on them because they were harassed and helpless. Like sheep without a shepherd, it says. And that's when he turned to his disciples and said, boy, the need is great. The harvest is ripe. We need workers for the harvest. The people were harassed and helpless. Fascinating words. In a world with no smartphones and no traffic jams and no nuclear bombs, people were still harassed and helpless because life was hard. They were struggling with relationships, struggling to figure out how to make life work. And this was in a region, these were people who had grown up with the Hebrew Bible, the Old Testament scriptures, and they would have identified as people who were followers of God. But still, life was hard and they were struggling. I guess it's always been that way because life is still hard. And even in our churches, in our faith communities, we know, if we're honest, that people struggling with anxiety and shame and codependence and depression and just confused about life and struggling with broken relationships, that there are many, many people, that everybody in some way is hurting because life is hard. And we still need workers. The latest, best statistics that I can find say that there are, in Santa Cruz County, there are about 15,000 people who identify as Protestant Christians, so that does not include our Catholic brothers and sisters. Don't know what those numbers would be, but about 15,000 people in our county who self-identify as followers of Jesus. There are about 30 therapists who identify as Christians. That's one for every 600 people. So you do the math. There's more than one out of every 600 people that are struggling and need somebody to talk to, need somebody to sit down and listen well and ask good questions and help them figure things out. So we still need shepherds. We still need workers because life is hard and people are struggling. It is not God's agenda that we have lives that are free from struggle, from pain. Even when we choose to try to faithfully follow God, it's simply not his agenda that our lives are free from trouble. Instead, his plan for that really is community. It's the church. The mission of the church is to care for people who are struggling. That is core to our purpose in our faith communities, whether it's in Santa Cruz or anywhere in the world. It is at the very heart of what it means to be the body of Christ, that we care and give attention and provide shepherds for struggling people who are struggling with their mental health and in their relationships. We are called to be communities of reconciliation and peace. We are called to help people be connected to their hearts and to figure out, to understand why they do what they do. And we are called to help people live out of their true identity as humans created in the image of God who are deeply loved, deeply valued, deeply delighted in by their Father. And we are called to help people be great lovers, to love well in their relationships, even in the midst of their struggles. This is what it means to be the church. That's why there's so many one another's in the New Testament. So many times when it says encourage one another, bear one another's burdens. Just be present with each other, be devoted to each other. Because it is God's desire that no one should struggle alone. I really believe that. No one should struggle alone. About 10 days ago, I had an experience that was brand new to me. I went rock climbing with one of my sons who lives in Seattle, and we drove into the North Cascades. And he's an accomplished rock climber, and so he took me rock climbing. We crossed a glacier to get to the place, and I've never climbed in my life. Never been in a climbing harness, never used the gear, not indoors in a gym, not outdoors anywhere. And the names of like the peaks where we were climbing were like Forbidden and then Torment. But we climbed an easy one called the Shark Fin. That's where my son took me. And it was challenging and exhilarating physically and mentally, but we got up to a place where I couldn't go any further because it just physically didn't have the strength or flexibility. So we started to come down, and I wasn't quite sure how to get from point A to point B at one point, so I fell. And I'm dangling, hanging in my harness in the rope, probably, 800 feet above, down a sheer cliff. Yes, thank you. Sympathy is appreciated. And I'm not going to make some analogy about faith, but I tell you what I was glad for at that moment. I mean, I was very focused. I wasn't thinking about my to-do list or what I was going to have for dinner or whether or not the Chicago Cubs had won or lost that day. Sorry, Mr. Dravecki, I'm a lifelong Cubs fan. I wasn't thinking about that. I was glad I was not alone. And when we're struggling with depression or anxiety, one of the things that brings the most help and comfort and hope is to not be alone. And that's why it is so crucial that our churches not stigmatize those struggles, that our churches and our faith communities and our small groups and our homes be places where it's okay to struggle, so that we don't have to struggle alone and keep it inside and feel like we're not allowed to talk about it. We want to give hope. That's what the church is called to do. About 7 years ago, I started an organization, a nonprofit called Respero. It's pronounced Respero because that's how I decided it was pronounced. It's a made-up word. But it's